Hello and welcome to Northern Ireland Meet the Makers podcast, where we speak to leaders shaping Northern Ireland's manufacturing and engineering sector. This series was produced in partnership with eData, a project supported by Peace Plus, a programme managed by the special EU programmes body, otherwise known as SEU-PB. Today I'm really pleased to be joined by Joanne Liddle. Joanne is Managing Director of IPC Mouldings. Joanne, you're very welcome to our Meet the Makers podcast. Just to kind of begin, if you could maybe just give us a wee bit about your background, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and more particularly, what does IPC Mouldings do?
So I'm Joanne Liddle. I am the Managing Director of IPC Mouldings. This is a manufacturing company established in 1994 by my elder brother and my father at the time. And we are primarily involved in aerospace. If you look at aircraft interiors, and in particular the seats, most of the plastic molded parts on the seats would have been made by IPC. So we're talking about the video bezels that house your screen for watching movies. I'm talking about the latch assemblies where you take your tray table down, the armrests in your chair, the end bays that support the chair, and a whole raft of other parts that you don't actually see. So we would do a lot of the injection molded parts and then the higher level assemblies. And we export all over the world and would have content in over 2 million aircraft seats that are flying commercially today.
So, 2 million passengers today are sitting on seats with a little bit of Northern Ireland in it. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary story how we can dominate that aircraft interior section. And maybe take it back a little step, but you weren't originally involved in manufacturing. So, how did you come to be into the business and then to be so dominant in something that we all take for granted when we board an aircraft?
Well, I suppose to give you a bit of the context, I come from a family of engineers, and even as a young child spent a few years down in Kilkeel where my father worked for what was then Aircraft Furnishing, and I remember getting in at a very young age and having a tour of the factory as it was then. If you fast forward to at school, I suppose I was good at maths, but at the time, it wasn't really a career path for girls to go into engineering, and I had no idea really where I fit it. My first job, as a matter of fact, was in an engineering factory, and I worked for McGreevy Engineering up in Ballygowan while my brother did his engineering apprenticeship next door in Croston Engineering. And these are still companies that I would have a connection with today. So while my brother and my cousins all did engineering, I ended up going into banking and finance. And I spent 10 years in banking and finance. And I suppose there's transferable skills there that you don't realise that you have. So I would be very process driven. So that was perfect whenever you're in banking. But whenever you come out and come into another sector and you realise all of a sudden, this is how a factory works. It's about the processes, and it's about keeping everything under control. It's about understanding all of those parameters. So actually, I found my happy place when I come into manufacturing.
And I mean, it's interesting, like through a number of these Meet the Makers podcasts, we've spoken to people who have been at the center of family businesses, absolutely. Some of those people, like yourself, have gone and had another career before coming back into manufacturing, or gone and worked for another manufacturing business before coming back to run their own manufacturing business or the family's manufacturing business. Is there something to be said for actually going out and just exploring the world outside that little confines of your own business before you really take that leadership role on?
Absolutely. It is that thing. You know what you know, and sometimes knowing what you don't know. And I would very much be an advocate of get out there, see other factories. I still love a factory visit today. It's my favorite thing. You always learn something new. You always meet new people. I think being in banking gave me a lot of discipline. There were days whenever, you're balancing something across a couple of accounts and it's off by 10 pence. But you had that discipline to look for 10 pence because that could be £10,000 in a debit and, 10,000 and 10 pence on a credit. So it was about that root cause analysis and finding the mistakes and putting processes in place to make sure that it didn't happen again. I'm a great believer in all of the transferable skills, but if you're outside of your own business, you are harnessing that experience of other people and other methods of and ways of doing things.
And obviously, starting your career outside that family business, outside manufacturing for that matter, and thinking back to when you kind of then came into the business and first took on that kind of leadership role within the business, was there kind of key lessons from that period for you that kind of still influence you today and how you actually lead this? I mean, obviously that diligence around process, that diligence around making sure everything's right and improving as you go along, that's very clear. But what other kind of lessons did you kind of pick up when you first started that you would just things you just wouldn't do today that you had to do back then?
Well, I suppose I've worn every hat in the business. While not an engineer, I have put in quality systems. I have looked at the finance systems. I've done a bit of HR. I've went into health and safety, you name it, and I have tried to do it. And most times, if I didn't know something, I would do a bit of research and I would teach myself. And that in itself can be scary, particularly as a finance person stepping into engineering and manufacturing, but also in those other areas like HR and employment law and health and safety. It's not that you can't learn these things, but the cost of getting them wrong can be massive. What I would say is don't try to do everything yourself, because the expert's fee is always going to be cheaper than the mistake. Very early on, I reached out to Invest NI and different people to try and help me with the things that I didn't know, because I couldn't even at that point identify what I didn't know. And every mistake that you make isn't necessarily a failure. It's just something else that you have learned. And I'm a great believer in, if you don't have the knowledge, you bring in an expert that has the knowledge to work you through.
It's a phrase I hadn't actually heard before, but the minute you said it, it just makes absolute sense that an expert's fee is always cheaper than making the mistake. I mean, I think a lot of people in business would be understandably concerned about bringing in an accountant, bringing in a HR, external resource, law resource, or whatever the case may be. I'll try to sort it out myself. I won't spend that money wastefully, etc., etc., etc. But in your experience, actually knowing what you know, you're very comfortable in that place. But there's things that just require expertise that absolutely require somebody from outside to come in. I mean, has that been born out of mistakes that have been made in the past? I mean, things never go well every time.
I suppose a bit of everything, and it's only when a situation presents itself that you realise you can be a bit out of your depth and you start to look around for the expert. And again, I'm not going to really involve myself in things where I don't really know what I'm doing. For the sake of this business, we need to have the right information at the right time. We need to have the right knowledge at the right time. And at the beginning, because it's a very small business, and I think whenever I came here, there was maybe about 15 people. And even now, we're just about 40 people. I can't afford within my business model to employ lawyers or to employ an HR executive or a full-time health and safety person. So it is that find the right people to work with, to collaborate with, and bring them in as part of the team, and maybe have them coming in one day a month. Certainly if I look at health and safety, we worked with an external person. And at the beginning, to get us where we needed to be, we had a 1-year program where he came in more often and, trained the team that we have, helped us put our systems in place, and then tapered off. And 10 years later, he still comes to us a couple of times a year just to give that sanity check on everything that we're doing. So it's always worthwhile.
I think there's real honesty there from you on that. I mean, don't involve yourself in things that you really don't understand.
No.
Is not your traditional entrepreneurial way where they kind of put head down, plow on, give it a rattle, hope for the best. I think there's a lot of wisdom there in what you're saying. It's maybe because you're a female leader in what's traditionally a male dominated industry where you need to make sure it's better to run the family home. Everything's got to be right. You can't rely on and dependent upon, particularly the men around you, to make sure that they get it right all the time as well. I just wanted to kind of talk briefly about that. I mean, we're manufacturing such a male-dominated industry at a leadership level. There's a lot of females employed in manufacturing, but I mean, what's been your experience as a female leader? Have you found that as a barrier? Is it something that's been helpful? What's that experience been like?
If I'm being honest, I think I just came into manufacturing at the right time whenever change was happening. And I have to say, I haven't encountered any barriers of that nature. Everyone that I have dealt with has really helped me to get where I need it to be. And it is that you have to ask for help as well. But it's not something I've encountered. Now, I know if you look at the numbers, there's a certain age group where there's going to be more males than females. Change takes time, and I see a very different landscape even now to the one that was here whenever I came into IPC 17 years ago. We have young engineers coming in, female engineers coming in to do internships. We have got a young female engineer in our team here. I don't think it's the male and the female as much anymore. It is about the attitude and the capability. And I think having a good mixture in the team, it makes the team stronger because we have different takes and things. I think sometimes you're looking at it in your team, you're looking at something from a completely different lens, and it just helps to start the conversation.
And you've struck there. I mean, there isn't a business, there isn't a manufacturing business out there that isn't struggling all the time to get good team and to retain good team. And what's been your approach? Is it a cultural thing because you're a female leader? Those young female engineers are more comfortable coming through? Is there stuff that you're doing specifically within the business that assists with that?
I suppose our approach has changed over the years. It is still evolving. If you look at this business, even whenever I joined, there were no young people in the business. I think the average age was about 45. And it always resonated with me. I don't know, some clever man once said if there was no people left to join a business, what would you do if the pool ran dry of all of the talent? And even at that point, going back 10 or 15 years ago, that really worried me. It concerned me. Where are the next generation coming from and what does it look like? So you have to be very intentional whenever you're planning for things like this. And we started to talk to the schools. We started to do school visits. We sponsored a couple of events, interventions, I would even call them, where it's like the Brian Cox Summer School, bringing young people together to try and identify, well, what actually are they good at? I think if I had have known at age 13 or 14 that I was process driven and that's the side of my brain that worked best, I maybe would have been more considerate of what career I went into. But it is speaking to young people, it's being visible to young people as a business. And we've spent a lot of time doing that. And now we have apprentices. We have got 2 apprentices on the shop floor. We have got 2 new apprentices coming in this summer, both in toolmaking and engineering. And we have interns coming in every year from Queen's. Now, that's not a place that we were in 10 years ago. And about 25% of our staff now are under 35, as opposed to 90% over 45. So it has been a very conscious decision. And the pool of talent is very small in Northern Ireland because we don't have enough people. There is the number being bandied about, 5,500 people needed in addition every year to enter the job market. So as a small business, how do we attract and how do we recruit? So we're changing how we do that. And sometimes it's not even about qualifications. It's about attitude, and it's, I suppose, a better hiring design. We hope to hire in the future based on attitude and not experience, because if we have the right attitude, we can train for the right skills. And that's a big mind shift for us. It's going to take us probably the next year, 18 months to get that all into action. But we do have real ambition for recruitment and for retention for the next sort of 5 years until we get to the level where certainly I'm happy that the next generation are coming through.
And I think those young people that are coming through in terms of the starting their apprenticeships with you this summer, they're incredibly lucky to be coming into an organization that culturally is there to kind of support them, that sees the real talent that's underneath the qualification or the experience that would have been looked for previously.
I suppose our knowledge lives in the workforce. You know, the skills that the operators have, the master assemblers, the people who know our machinery, they know our equipment, they know our product. As I say, that retention matters enormously.
Regardless of the machines that you purchased or the buildings or anything else, I mean, the cost of that knowledge is enormous, and retaining that and sharing that and passing it on to another generation is mission critical in many ways. And you talked there about a wise man once said, I'm not claiming that I'm that wise or smart man, but I have been saying for the last 10 years to those who care to listen that assume from this day forward you'll never be able to recruit anybody ever again. And where does that move you as a leader within your business to think about the strategic investments that you need to make? What does it mean in terms of what you do to retain people? Because if you can't recruit people, by God, you need to make sure you retain the people that you have. And then secondly, what does it mean in terms of improving those jobs through automation, through robotics, through digitization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to talk a little bit just about IPC Mouldings and that kind of digital and innovation journey. I mean, digital transformation is a very, very broad term, but can you give us a bit of an insight into what sort of technology is deployed within IPC Mouldings, and what do you think that will look like in the future for you?
Well, I suppose I would start off by saying, we embrace technology without being seduced by it. Sometimes these things are the latest shiny new things, and there's huge opportunities in automation and data digitalization, but we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve before investing? So we spent about 2 years looking at our current systems, and we spoke to every expert that we could find in preparation for going into a KTP with Queen's and AMIC. And that's driving real change in our business, particularly around productivity. We do have an ultimate goal, and that is to take our very, very complex forecast and planning system, and it's a moving target of around 400 lines and something like 1,200 different SKUs. And with daily changes on quantities, with daily changes on dates, and we're trying to manage that while delighting our customer, seeing around corners, anticipating what they need, and retaining that quality and delivery performance. So it is complex, and we've taken that one particular thing that we would like to change, and it will probably release about 60 hours a week just in the management of that planning. And that's the core thing. That's what we're looking at with the KTP and the output that we're looking for. So it is understand exactly what problem you're trying to solve.
And from a cost point of view, like 60 hours management time per week, that's a couple of people largely.
It is.
And as a small business and trying to drive your efficiency and your productivity, particularly for an industry that is sharp on its contracts that it signs with its suppliers, I mean, it's such a critical thing. Your profit may be sitting in that 60 hours.
Manufacturing is notoriously difficult, and that's one thing that I would say. Know your business model and know it inside out so that you do understand what levers you can pull whenever times get a bit harder, but also when you're in a period of growth. That can present just as much risk as a period of contraction, and we look at those levers constantly. We're constantly challenging the business model. We're constantly looking for better ways to do things, because at the end of the day, it's about getting product out the door, and it's getting product out the door in a timely way and with the best quality. So our mantra here is quality and scale, and we're trying to do that without any impact on our deliverables and our performance.
And I mean, you very kindly have opened the doors to your factory today through this podcast. You talked about loving just going and visiting other factories and seeing what they do and listening to other leaders and understand that their problems and how you can relate that back to solving things within your own business. You talked about engaging with Queens on a KTP and with the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre at AMIC. I mean, you're not afraid to collaborate with people. And I know, particularly in the aerospace industry in Northern Ireland, the there's an intimate relationship between the primaries and the supply chains and people all around, despite the fact that that's a commercial arrangement. People do work incredibly well together, and they're not suspicious. They're open to working together. I mean, what would you say to the other manufacturers that may be listening in, or you are suspicious of competitors or other people that might be their neighbours, even for that matter? I mean, what do you say to them in terms of getting over themselves and actually getting out there and working closely with their counterparts?
Well, competitors or potential collaborators, we would work very closely within the supply chain that we are currently in with even some of our competitors, because it's about understanding the value that we are offering. So, for example, we are competing against some companies in low-cost countries. There are things that they will do better, and there are things that we will do better. So, if it is that generic product that you're making tens of thousands or millions, maybe better with a low-cost country. But if it's the highly complex, high-level assembly that is a difficult product to pull together and manage another supply chain, that maybe sits better with us. We're not your traditional injection molders. We're actually much more than that. And if it's just traditional injection molding that you want, maybe then we are not the business to partner with. But if it is that high value and highly complex, and even managing those relationships within supply chain, then that's where we excel. So we know what we do and what we do best. It's often said Northern Ireland is punches above its weight in aerospace, but I think we're being too humble because we are exactly where we should be. It's not about geography or talent. It's the density of relationships in a relatively small region. We tend to know everyone, and we're able to start conversations. And when you get the right people in the room, things certainly move faster, and it's an opportunity, and it's something that you do have to be intentional about.
I think that's so right. I mean, we do punch above our weight in so many ways, but we're incredibly modest, maybe even shy, which people would find odd, really, to say that. But we don't realize, we certainly don't project how good we actually are to the point of boasting about it. But actually, we're hard to beat whenever we work together on things, and that's very evident in the sector that you're particularly engaged with. I mean, you came into the business 17 years ago. You said there was about 15 people involved. You've basically almost tripled the workforce since then. There's 2 million seats. There's 2 million rear ends sitting on seats staring at a piece of IPC Mouldings as I speak somewhere in the world. For you, what does the future hold? Because those numbers are in themselves are extraordinary. And what's the future for IPC Mouldings?
There is a lot of opportunity. We have got ambitious enough growth plans, but I would say it's a steady growth. It's a controlled growth. The beauty of aerospace is that you can look at a 10-year forecast on where the industry's going, because you can see the numbers for Airbus and Boeing for planes being built, and you can always analyze where you sit within those numbers, where your customer sits. We're very fortunate that we can look out in a forecast probably for about 18 months to 2 years. And any big program that we're on, we would have, I suppose, maybe a 6 or 7 year sweet spot after the MPI stage where we're bringing in a new product. And as that product gets to the end of its life, we're usually replacing it with another product. We support aftermarket for up to 15 years. So we have a long life cycle, and that helps us with our planning. So certainly whenever we compete for new business and we're winning new business, we know we're going to have that business for 10 years, and we'll start to wrap the numbers around that and grow with it. But certainly we are, I suppose we are identified as a growth partner within our sector and with our customer. There's a lot more that we could be doing, and that's even before we start to move outside of aircraft seating, and we can move into the interior space a bit more. We can move into aerospace more. We would be very aligned for even defence, because I would say the standards that the primes demand in terms of quality, in process discipline and compliance flow down through the supply chain. That raises the capability of the whole manufacturing base. So we would be well positioned to go into other industries.
I mean, I think there is probably fewer industries out there that demand the levels of compliance that you have to achieve. And rightly so. I mean, people are on these aircraft and they need to land safely, and every component has a role to play in making sure that that happens. It's not just about comfort or how things look. So to take that level of compliance, every industry should be assured about the quality of what they're going to get from an IPC Mouldings product. There's no doubt about that at all. And Joanne, just to kind of wrap up for today, I mean, looking back over your 17 years in the business and your career before that, is there anything you would have done perhaps differently if you were starting out again? And that kind of leave that kind of little nugget of advice for maybe a young manufacturer, somebody just setting out on their business, somebody who's taking the risk of leaving a job to set up on their own. What piece of advice would you give those people?
I suppose that one of the most important one is on challenges and failures. Instinct tells us to avoid failure, but failures are education. And every problem that I've came across, from production to contracts, bad hires, these were the moments, I suppose, that built the business. And I would say fail faster and learn from it more deliberately if you analyse the problem and the solution. And you question yourself, what did it teach you about your processes or your people or your assumptions? As well as that, be ruthless in challenging your business model, because manufacturing changes and supply chains shift and the margins get squeezed. Customer expectations change and your business needs to evolve to meet those changes. And it's easy to become consumed in the daily operations, especially in a growth phase. But build in time on a regular basis to genuinely ask yourself, is the business model right? And not just are we performing, but is everything right? Is it where our vision of the future is? Lastly, and probably the most important thing, I would say, is join a peer group from day one. Find your people, because the learning curve is shorter. The isolation is very real. And I've worked closely, I suppose, with Invest NI in the early days. I've met other manufacturers in my field. And that led me to ADS, which in turn started us on the SC21 journey. Everything is about the people that you meet and the people that you work with, and we can learn so much from each other. Finding your people and joining a peer group, I would say, would be massive.
Joanne, I think everybody watching in today would agree that you're not just a talented, but a really authentic leader. You must be a delight to work with. You're probably confirmed that that's not true, but I'm very envious of those young people who are coming into your business this summer because they have a really good career ahead of them. There's no doubt about that, but a career in an environment and in a culture that's going to be very supportive of them. I've learned a lot from just chatting to you today, whether it's about the cost of exports is often cheaper than the cost of the mistake, about embracing and not being seduced by some of these technologies that are out there. And actually about your honesty that failures are about learning and don't be afraid to fail because that's actually where the best learning can actually take place. Congratulations to you. You were in our Manufacturing Hall of Fame. Obviously, the Palace saw that and gave you an award, which I know you're very embarrassed by, but rightly so. It's clear that IPC Mouldings has a very successful now, but an even more successful future as well. And congratulations to you and all your colleagues and continued success.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, John.